All right, we're going to get started. So if everybody could grab a seat, please. Just some quick announcements. So beers and some water is in the fridge over here. There's some also white wine there, and then the food is all the way in the back. Bathrooms, for those that don't know, is right here. Anything else you guys need? Bathrooms and drinks, that's all we need, right? Okay, so just quick raise of hands. I saw a couple of new faces coming in. If you could raise your hand, just if this is the first org that you're attending. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so about 7 or 8 people. Cool, welcome. We throw these monthly, kind of, sometimes every other month, but we've been doing them once a month right now. One of the slides we'll cover in a little bit was just some of our upcoming events. So today we have 2 full talks today. Both of them are kind of related to automated deployments and also just about full stack monitoring. So a little bit more on the technical side, more geared towards that audience. Randall is our first presenter. He'll be going up in a second. He's from LogicMonitor, and he's here to tell us their story that they went through quite a few trials and tribulations and came up with a solution that they're really proud of and that's working well for them, and they just want to share some of that knowledge with others here who might be going through some of those same challenges. Himanshu from Addteq, right there in the second row, will be doing the second talk, and he'll be talking primarily about full stack monitoring, mostly with Dynatrace. Gordon, somewhere here? Oh, right here, Gordon, right in front. Gordon will be doing a lightning talk. We encourage our users to do a lightning talk. It's a very short talk, but we hope that talk stimulates some discussion. So in between Randall and Himanshu, Gordon will come up and just show a couple of slides, share some of his story, and try and get some feedback from the group. And we encourage all of you, each one of you have a story, right? Like you all have some tools and some challenges that you're running into or something that you're really proud of at your organization. Just even if it's like a 5-minute talk, I think people want to hear, like one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we get in our surveys is that people are interested in hearing other people's stories. Chances are you're probably running into similar challenges, and if somebody else has already solved that challenge, it helps like build that connection and helps you overcome some things. So 2 full talks and a lightning talk. Just real quick, just to get some of the sponsorship out of the way. So we're at a beautiful space here again, Priceline. John Patton, who's over there by the refrigerator, has thankfully opened up his space for us, and so we're grateful. Event locations are one of our biggest challenges, and so we're always looking for event locations and user speakers. So if you're interested in speaking or you're interested in hosting an event, we'd be very grateful. We're very appreciative, and we'll it helps build this community and help things keep going. So thank you to John for hosting another event here. Also, we have a couple of sponsors. So some of you may have had sushi already. Addteq sponsors our sushi. They've been sponsoring sushi for, I don't know, since the last 2 years. It's been a while, but it's a nice touch to get the sushi there. We also have Column Technologies who's sponsoring, and eCore. So some of the beer you're drinking, some of the wine, bonchon wings, dessert, like all of this is coming from sponsors. Pizza's coming from Atlassian. So, and then we also have Atlas Authority. That is, Boris is somewhere here in the crowd. He's back there. They're sponsoring our user speaker prizes. So non-partner speakers who do like a full talk qualify for, well, not qualify, automatically get a prize. And Atlas has partnered up with the org leaders just to kind of help promote users to come and tell their story. So if you can give us a 25-minute talk, we'll guide you through it. Like if you have a story to tell, we'll work with you to get that presentation out. You can also, you can get a Google Home Mini, or what else do you have? An Echo Dot. Here's a catalog. There's an Atlas Authority catalog that you can select from. So, right. So thank you to all of our sponsors. Randall will actually be our first. We'll award him a prize later. He'll be our first winner of one of those prizes just because he's a non-partner speaker. Just 3 other things quickly. There's a raffle at the end of this event. So you might have to leave early. You probably, if you're not a partner, you should have received a raffle ticket. So usually if you have a green tag, you should have received a raffle ticket. If you haven't, go speak to Dilip. He'll get you a raffle ticket. We have swag codes today, and we have an Amazon Fire TV stick. So some decent prizes today for the raffle, so stick around at the end. And then in our sliding deck, you might have seen that we've started posting some job opportunities. There's at least 4 job postings that people have notified us about. We're trying to offer that as a service. We're constantly speaking and networking to people, and people are like, hey, I'm looking for a position, or hey, I'm hiring for somebody. So it's not a lot of effort for us to actually make that information available to you. We're just storing as much of that information as possible. So it'll be on the looping deck. There's 4 positions that are out there. Come speak to us if you're looking for a position or if you're interested in any of those 4. We'll have it again during the intermission and at the end during networking so that you can see what those positions are, and it'll be posted on our website as part of the event notes. And finally, just a quick raise of hands. There's a different crowd here than at our last event. Is anybody here currently going to Euro Summit? 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a maybe, I think. So 4.5 people? Okay. Okay. If you're on the fence, if you're thinking about going there and like price is an issue, we do have a 25% off discount. And I think somebody will probably up the ante. Maybe somebody will get a % discount. Is it 30? Yeah. So org members, you get 25%. Somebody has a 30% coupon there at the back if you're interested in beating us by 5%. Okay, that's it. So let's hand it over to Randall. Randall's going to talk to us about their exciting story that they're proud of and about a solution that's working really well for them. I'll give it off to Randall.
Thank you, Marlon. You stole my intro paragraph. I'm going to repeat it anyways. Hi, everyone. I'm Randall Thompson, Senior Technical Operations Engineer at LogicMonitor. And I want to get our marketing spiel out of the way. LogicMonitor provides software as a service-based IT infrastructure performance monitoring solution for cloud, data center, on-premise, or all the above. We provide native support for thousands of devices, physical, virtual, whatnot. And we integrate with a wide variety of tools, such as ServiceNow, Puppet, and several Atlassian tools. So our TechOps team manages the infrastructure which provides LogicMonitor for our customers. And our team specifically straddles the line between reactive and proactive work. We ensure uptime while managing near constant change and growth. So this talk is about what our team has done to enable other teams in the company, specifically development, to manage their own software deployments. And as Marlon said, I'm presenting this story because it's something we're very proud of, me personally. And what we built, I thought we'd share the story, figuring it would be useful for other people or organizations to potentially implement themselves. So with that, at the time we were trying to solve our problems, there were not a lot of concrete examples from Google or Stack Overflow search results. So here goes. I tend to jump into, sorry, I've got my notes here and that there. I tend to jump right into the nitty-gritty of things. So I wanted to kind of spend a brief couple moments going over the two main subjects of the talk, Bamboo and Ansible. I'm going to keep referring to these two things. So I just want to take a quick raise your hand poll of who's heard of Bamboo before? Okay, great. And then who uses Ansible? Okay. Does anyone use them together? Great. So for those who aren't aware, Bamboo is an Atlassian product for building and deploying software. And Ansible is an open source, though it was acquired by Red Hat a couple years ago, tool for automating configuration management, both Linux and Windows. So the why. I joined LogicMonitor about 2.5 years ago. And at the time I joined, we had a monolithic application that we were evolving into a microservice architecture. With the conversion of a monolith into a microservice, you have a lot more applications, a lot more coordination, and a lot more complexity. At the same time, we're experiencing growth as we've continued to today. Growth both in number of customers as well as the number of different applications that were coming out of this one app. And so time is very precious, and our group tries to outsource that either to robots, computers, or other teams when possible. So our old way was simply not working. One of our coworkers described it as artisan crafted server management. That really rung true for me. So as an example, when we used to deploy our applications, we would literally SCP a jar around to different servers, SSH into them, run a Perl script locally on each host to go through the application deployment. This was pretty time consuming, led to inconsistencies, and again, it just was not scaling with us. So a little more context on the whole complexity piece. As a SaaS company, we have a variety of applications and servers and various components that are required to provide the LogicMonitor service to our customers. We refer to this collection of services as a pod, and as we add more customers, we have to add more pods. As we add new components, we have to apply that component to all of our pods and ensure that the pods, both as customers grow and as applications grow, they stay consistent so that we don't have to deal with one-off problems between our different pods. So just an example, we've got Tomcat and Kafka and HA Proxy and a bunch of homegrown apps on top of that. We also have a set of global resources as well. So the conflict. We were having some scaling issues. A as I mentioned before, both infrastructure growth and microservice growth and customer growth. We had monthly an increasing number of apps to deploy. So we needed to develop a deployment process that was consistent, irrespective of our environments, these pods. And we wanted a application deployment process that was consistent for all applications. We had started, as the app started to break out, to not hold anyone back. We developed little hacks here and there to get those apps out. But again, the more one-off processes, the more there was to manage, the more there could go wrong. So we wanted to have something that would be consistent for each app, knowing that there's going to be more and more components being broken out. We also wanted to develop a resilient deployment process that did not depend upon our team being the human keyboards. What I mean by that is we wanted it to be as simple as clicking a button, running one command, and not having to have humans go and play defensive mode and fix things and whatnot. We wanted it to be very simple, to be able to fall back if it failed and not leave things in a broken state. So this brings us to our solution. We wanted to empower our developers to be able to deploy applications themselves. We realized that we were often the gatekeepers of the process, and that meant that we were holding back, or we could have been in a position of holding back progress, so to speak. And we didn't want to be in that position. We didn't want to have emails that said, how come the TechOps team has not deployed this application yet, or how come TechOps team has not anything. So the solution we put together was to use Bamboo deployment plans. And that tied back into our scaling issue. We knew by using Bamboo, we could kind of systematically define our deployment projects so that they were consistent for all the applications. We also used Ansible playbooks to help with the consistency and to also help with the auditing process. And I'll get to that in just a second. So by using Ansible playbooks, our operations team was able to enforce controls and processes. And this helped us not only maintain sanity, but ensured compliance with security policies. We added in HipChat notifications. So our whole company uses HipChat for communication. It's probably our primary communication means. And we would often get questions from different people around the company of what application version is running where and when are the deployments happening. And so by integrating HipChat into our application deployment process, we were able to create a room where people could follow all of our deployments. Not everyone cares, but some people care very much. And especially for support, it enabled them to know if something was happening to some customer, they could check the deployments room and find out if a recent application had been deployed to that customer. And so it enabled them to have access to information in a self-service manner. Instead of us going, again, back to the human keyboard metaphor, normally it's just questions inbound to our team. Who changed what? When did this happen? And that didn't scale either. We used Docker for the deployment agents. This was before Bamboo integrated this as a native feature. They've done that recently, and we're actually going to be looking at that. But what Docker enabled us to do was have a basically an image with a self-contained environment that we could use to deploy our applications. By Dockerizing the Ansible playbook, we could control what version of Ansible we were using. We could also bundle in any custom modules that we've developed for Ansible. You can, of course, get your modules approved through Atlassian's process, or sorry, not Atlassian's, Ansible's process, but not all the modules you write need to actually be available for public consumption. And then finally, we integrated our own LogicMonitor API so that we could set scheduled downtimes for our services during the deployment to prevent pages from being sent out. In addition, we log a note in LogicMonitor about the version of the application that was deployed, where it was deployed, so that when we go back and do diagnostic work, we have meaningful context to, say, spikes in CPU activity or drops in memory, whatnot. So it was helpful for both diagnosing good issues and bad. We could see this deployment remove some problem or this deployment cause some problem. So for those familiar with Bamboo, you might be wondering why we added the extra complication of Ansible instead of just using the native Bamboo tasks. So I'm going to cover that next. So tasks, Ansible versus Bamboo. Why use Ansible? Bamboo is not our starting place for deployments. Initially, they were run locally by Perl scripts. We then evolved that process to use Ansible playbooks. We had more and more servers to deploy to, and Ansible was the first step in helping create a consistent process. Once we had the Ansible playbooks well tested and both in our QA and staging and production environments, we basically had Bamboo launch the Ansible plays for us. We were heavily familiar with Ansible and the notion of an inventory file and didn't know quite the best way to merge that back into an Ansible task. When we deploy an app to a pod, that app will be on, like, say, 10 different servers in that pod. So we needed a way to iterate deploying that app across all the 10 servers. And since Ansible is already working for us, it continued to work for us well in Bamboo. We later, again, kind of growing and scaling, moved to a dynamic inventory model, which we, again, had already integrated with Ansible. And so we just added a separate task in Bamboo to dynamically fetch our inventory of what app, where the servers were for what given app and what given environment needed the deploy, and then we feed that into the Ansible playbook through a Bamboo task. So this also ensures that someone with admin rights to a deployment plan does not have the ability to alter the steps involved in the deployment. We, as a maturing company with enterprise customers, had to make sure that we conform to SOC compliances and whatnot. And there's various reasons we needed to enable our developers and some other people to be able to edit a deployment plan. But we did not want them actually altering the tasks that actually deployed the software. So on the slide, Ansible task advantages, they can work with or without Bamboo. So when we are testing changes and whatnot to the deployment process, we can do that without the complexity of Bamboo. We can just run our Ansible plays, make sure they work, and then as the last step, we can re-enable the Bamboo task to trigger that play. The other advantage was that the Ansible playbooks could be managed in a software repo with revision control. I haven't looked at this recently to see if Atlassian's made any major changes, but last time I checked, the best there was for revision control with the tasks was to go into the audit log and hope to see who might have changed something, but it doesn't even give you a diff of the task change. Maybe that's changed, but some other disadvantages of the Bamboo tasks was that we found it challenging to SSH to multiple hosts. Not everyone is 100% containers. We are half and half. So we do have some Bamboo deployments that are not using Ansible for containerized environments, but for all our non-containerized, it was far easier. And then I already mentioned the revision control audit trail, not fully featured. So we use both manual and automated Bamboo deployments. By integrating Bitbucket or Stash, you can have commits to certain branches of your repos cause triggers. They can be defined as triggers to automatically deploy. So for our QA environments, we typically auto deploy based upon, say, a commit to a develop branch. That way, as soon as developers have pushed their commits, they don't have to even log into Bamboo. It just gets executed and deployed automatically. Our staging environments typically require a Jira ticket for part of the workflow because the staging environments mirror our production. So it doesn't have the exact same security controls in place, but it still needs a ticket there for the auditing process. And then we have Lambda functions making external calls both into Jira or Bamboo to assist with the triggering in the staging environments. For instance, someone manually will approve of a Jira ticket. As soon as it's in the approved state, Lambda is checking every 5 minutes and will trigger a deployment. For most production environments, the deploys are triggered manually by a component team lead. And we found this practice to work well. Developers are often best poised to understand the changes at play during a deployment, and they're often required to mitigate any issues that arise after the deployment. So having them right at the pace of the deployments made the most sense for us. So just a quick overview of where we are at today, and I'll get to some mistakes that were definitely made. All projects, all of our components, even non-customer facing, should be, I say should be, hosted in Bitbucket. We use Jira to enforce restrictions on branch commits. For example, requiring 2 senior members of a team to approve a PR before it can get merged into master. The production deployment plans require commits to master before they can they deploy from the master branch, so keeps that control in place. We use Bamboo both to build and deploy software. Ansible governs the process required by each app to facilitate the smooth upgrade. And then we use LogicMonitor to ensure that the app is providing the expected service to our customers. Again, the Ansible playbook also handles, sometimes we have our scheduled downtime set by Bamboo, sometimes they're set by the playbook. In either case, the goal is to make sure that nobody gets paged during a normal application deployment. So just cover our timeline so you can see kind of how long this process took to do, and some mistakes. So LogicMonitor was founded around 2007. I made the slide PR friendly. we literally put the jars in SCPing to servers and whatnot, running Perl scripts. It was pretty ad hoc. So in 2012, 2013, we introduced the notion of a war. This was where we had Bamboo actually building the software instead of it being built on somebody's laptop somewhere. And so we were using Stash to store all the repos in Bamboo for the builds. 2014, 2015, we started deploying things with Bamboo. I say things because we were not really ready to go quite to production yet. So we started with some internal applications first, and then started moving to testing environments. And then in late 2016, 2017, we basically finished the process to have all applications deployed via Bamboo and via our developers, so that our team was no longer the gatekeeper of the process. By combining everything mentioned before, a pretty solid process had been built such that we could finally hand it off, and that has made everybody on our team very happy. So nothing's perfect. Mistakes were made. Mistakes were often found late in the game as well. One of probably the most common mistakes we found is that when we set this all up, everything was all tied into the develop branch. And when we started moving to production deployments, a lot of, well, we didn't have that many at the time, but several of the deployment plans were still linked to the develop branch. So we had some interesting deployments to production early on. Even though we had thought everything was tested, fully vetted, whatnot, we were deploying the wrong version of the apps. We got over that, and that was probably the biggest snafu, so I thought I'd mention it to humble ourselves. So some takeaways. Let the robots and or coworkers do your job for you. Some people feel empowered by being able to control something, and you can get a certain amount of self-worth or self-worth to the company by owning it all yourself. And it's not necessarily a terrible attitude to have, but your time is limited and it just can't scale forever. So if you govern everything yourself, you'll never free up time to move on to anything else. So we enabled other people. They don't even know how the app is deployed, but they're better suited, as I said, to understand what will go wrong once it is deployed. And for that matter, they don't really need to know how it is deployed. Another takeaway is minimize the number of methods needed for deployments. I mentioned this early on. We used to have a variety of methods for deploying applications, and that model was not working. So we did our best to make sure that all applications conform to using a standard deployment plan. And then lately, we have gotten into using Bamboo specs. If you're not familiar with it, Bamboo specs let you define your Bamboo build and deployment projects as code. So we have another software repo for our Bamboo specs, and that has made it so that we are no longer right-clicking, or not right-clicking, but clicking on the little dots and duplicating environment and sorting everything to make it look nice. So this has helped us further evolve better organization, enforce standards, and also environments. As we grew the number of pods that we needed to deploy to, for every app, we would have to add a new environment. So now what we've tied together is the ability for the Bamboo spec to query a list of our environments and then create deployment environments for all of those on the fly. I am not on live internet here, so I can't show a demo, but after the talk, if anybody would like to see I can happily pull up my laptop and show you the process as it's orchestrated together, including the HipChat notifications and the STTs and LogicMonitor, and then a live tail of the Bamboo deployment process. So with that, any questions? Is anybody doing this? Yeah?
I think a really great talk. We internally use Bamboo quite a bit and also Ansible, of combination of both. So one question I did have was in terms of managing variables and features, do you tend to use the Bamboo variables feature, or do you integrate with like a kind of key store, or use the Ansible vault, combination of all?
Good question. We use mostly Bamboo environment vars passed into the container, and we are moving to HashiCorp Vault for managing secrets. So that's kind of our next phase. We use a couple different things, like for certain credentials. There's a plugin for Bamboo, like the AWS Identity Federation thing. That's what we use for some auth access to, like, the wars get published to S3. We then fetch them from S3, so we need to auth for that. Yeah.
So you talked about Bamboo specs, seed specs.
Yes, specs.
How are those any different from the Ansible playbook?
Bamboo specs are, so the Ansible playbook is just the set of tasks that get run across all the servers.
Yeah.
Bamboo specs define your actual Bamboo build plans and your Bamboo deployment plans. So I can show you this on my laptop later, but if you have a Bamboo build plan and you're running like Bamboo 613 or something, you can now like edit your plan and then click View Plan as Spec, and it will show you some Java code that is like reverse engineered of your build plan. So what we end up doing, it's basically something with Maven, something. All I know is writing code and type make and make apply. So it just gets out of the process of clicking, and creating your deployment plan separately from the build plan. You can create it all at once and have everything linked together.
Thank you. Any more questions? Cool.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
That was a great presentation.
And feel free to grab me later if you do want to see any of this stuff.
Yeah, as we previously mentioned, that as a part of recognition, that we want people to come forward and do a presentation, like a full talk, like what Randall did. So we have Atlas Authority who is going to sponsor that gift. So this time what we have, a Google Home Mini. So we would like to give this to our speaker, Randall. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not yours.
He's telling me that you have to hold it like this. So Boris is the sponsoring partner of this, and again, part of what we did with Atlas Authority is we're committed to getting as many user speakers as possible, individuals sharing their stories just like Randall did, and stories that you're proud of, and it doesn't even have to be stuff that you're proud of. He just told you a moment that they effed up on, right? Like where they put stuff into like a developer end and they put that out into production, right? I mean, those are all things those are gotchas that other people like can learn from your mistakes. And so, there's a little bit of humility there. And so like where this is a Google Home Mini, there's other gadgets I mentioned. There's a whole catalog there. So
Yeah, no, actually, Boris has a garage full of those kind of stuff. So we just need you guys. Just come over here, talk, and Boris will pay for it.
So Randall, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Again, if any one of you are interested to talk, just share anything. Like something that you screwed up, you fucked up, or something that you managed to fix it or make it work, reach out to any one of us, either Manlon, Dilip, or myself, and we would be more than happy to get you in place and make sure that you get the gadgets that you want.
Yeah, and so at the end of the session, we have about an hour worth of networking, give or take, depending on how the talks go. So Randall's going to be around. So if you want to see the live demo, we've seen it. There just wasn't enough time in this session to go through the live demo, but it works. We verified that it works. He showed us that it works, and there's no wizard behind. I mean, there is a wizard behind the curtain, actually. So, okay. So thanks again, Randall. And next up is a lightning talk. I mentioned Gordon from Verizon will just talk about a use case and issue that they're running into, and just, let's see if it stimulates some conversation. We're time boxing the section to about 15 minutes or so. Let's see how much time we actually need for it. And if it seems like there's a lot to talk about, we'll try to pause that conversation just so that we don't hold the second speaker too long, and then we can continue that conversation later on into networking. All right, so without further ado, Gordon, you mic'd up? Okay.
Hello, testing. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Gordon Huang. I'm coming from Verizon. I lead one of the platform team at Verizon, where we manage and own all the Atlassian stacks that we use at the company. Today, I just want to do a quick lightning talk to share our journey, right, in terms of our growth through our process of scaling Atlassian products. And this time, I want to specifically focus on test case management and Jira plugins. Okay, just some background on where we are right now. We are probably one of the largest Jira instances in the world. We have about 23,000 users, 1,300 customized fields, and 2.4 million issues in our data center instance. And as you can see, our growth rate here in terms of users as well as number of projects, it's basically up and up. A little bit of history. We started it back in 2015, end of 2015. And within about 1 year, we had a growth rate of 300% in terms of number of issues. We had a breakdown of automation, issues generated by automation, and issues generated by actual users, between about 75% user base versus 25% automation. But coming to 2018, that has changed, right? And as you all see in the industry, automation became a very big thing in terms of growth and scaling. And we basically have 30%, now 30% of our issues are coming in through automation, while 7% through users. And our issues, number of issues in our instance, basically jumped to 2.4 million. So what does this mean? Well, actually, let me talk about architecture. So you're thinking about, okay, this is pretty big. How do you handle this? When we first tackled this problem, we thought about hardware. So we maxed out the number of nodes that we can actually have with Jira, put it behind a load balancer, running a SQL database in the back end, and NFS. This worked well for a while until our automation started increasing. And what do I mean by automation? These are test case management tools such as our Zephyr plugin, generated about 60,000 issues per month. And when they do this, it's not over a consistent period of time. Basically, every day in the morning around 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., the team comes in, triggers some automation, and they're generating thousands of issues in Jira within 1 minute. So when this happened and we look at our monitoring, the New Relic or whatever we use, we see our CPU jump. Memory usage jump, and we'll hit garbage collection where we just couldn't recover. So in today's lightning talk, I just want to see what is other people's experience in terms of dealing with this type of issues, right? In terms of how are you dealing with automated users and how are you dealing with test automations specifically? Feel free to, okay. So as I mentioned, we're probably one of the largest instances in the world. And it doesn't really surprise me that, you know, this is not something that you guys are experiencing right now. But I'll bet you that in the next few years, as more and more of your test users and IT users are starting using test automation, they will get Jira to a point where automation will be the biggest problem that you're going to have. So what's happening at Verizon? We're looking at this in multiple ways, right? One is we are currently working really hard to look for ways that we can reduce the number of custom fields that we have. And we're also aggressively deleting old issues. So basically, we're running a
Custom fields affect performance.
oh hell yeah, oh yeah, those are killers, and also issues too, right? Because we have so many issues. So we're aggressively filtering, doing a search for old issues that are closed, and we're deleting them, right? So right now we're targeting about 100,000 issues that we want to remove on a monthly basis, right? And that's not even enough, because if you look at my growth rate in one of my previous slides, I'm actually have a net increase of 200,000 issues on a monthly basis, right? And that is with the deletion that we're doing. The solution that we come up with, we want to tackle the thing that we think is causing the issues. And that thing, what we think the issue is automation caused by our testing users through the Zephyr plugin. And the solution that we're coming up with is multi-tier. One, we want to move our testing user off of Zephyr plugin and into a dedicated test case management tool. There are many tools out there like QA Symphony, Zephyr Enterprise, HPQC, take your pick. We did a POC with multiple products, and we're about to go forward with one of them, pending on how that product performed in our current user trial as well as POC. We think that by doing this, we can actually reduce the spikes that we've been seeing every morning, right, when the automation comes into play. And also reduce the number of issues that's being generated, because there's no way that I can delete issues fast enough than the way that the issues are actually getting into the system through these type of automations.
So when you say delete, you mean just delete, not archive?
Okay, yes, archive and then delete. But I made it short so that I don't have to explain the detail. I mean, we have a process where we identify, notify, archive, right? And then from archive, we delete, right? And it's an ongoing process that we run on a weekly basis. That question?
Did you have more of a problem with the rate or the volume?
I think the problem is more on the spike, because in a normal day, everything is pretty flat. But it's just that once a while, when the automation kicks in, or maybe it's end of the month and there's a big release, then that's when we see that spike that comes up.
And what do you feel when that spike happens? Like what does things just fall to a standstill? Like
Yeah, so basically what happened is we usually see one of the note, triggers an alert, garbage collection, cannot recover, right? And we go investigate, and because that node is stuck in the garbage collection, all the traffic is being rerouted to the other 4 nodes. And those 4 nodes eventually go into garbage collection, and one after another, the entire system goes down. But because we're going in there and we're proactively addressing the issues before it triggers the other nodes, then we're able to recycle the ones that has problem, or take it out of load balancer and then recycle that node so that it recovers.
Go ahead. The load balancer doesn't fail the node of some sort? Manually.
The garbage collection alert kicks in first. So we basically, before the load balancer responds, we already know that there's going to be an issue. Exactly. Your system has to be pretty much non-responsive, right, at all before the load balancer picks it up. So what happened with Jira when we encounter this problem is that it's not that the whole thing is actually just stop responding, but it just takes a long time to respond. Yes.
And so in this new solution that you're looking at, the 60,000 issues that are added per month, you're not adding 60,000 variations anymore. That's self-contained within whatever that POC is.
Well, we haven't implemented a solution. We're still in POC stage, but
is that the plan? Like that?
That's part of the plan, because the way to performance tune an application is you really have to look at governance, right, and how you manage the growth rate. So even I moved the testing user off of this instance of Jira, the growth rate of the system will still continue, right? So the only way that I can maintain this equilibrium is that I need to put in really strong governance where I'm capping the number of custom fields that we're allowed to create, capping the schemas that people are allowed to use, as well as the number of issues, right? So the way that we cap issue is aggressively archiving issues that are out of date. So the retention period will shrink, right? From what we have now is about 6 months. We're looking to shrink that to 3 months, right? And that still doesn't work, then federation. Yeah. So one of the ways to reduce number of custom fields is try to merge ones that are very similar. But that's a very painful process because we're talking about 1,200 custom fields. And you want to merge them basically every single field. You got to go talk to the user about, hey, we want you to merge this. This is the reason why. There's no way we can keep that up. So we took a very aggressive stand and just go, if you're not using it, we don't see you using it, we're just going to remove it.
Is the 5-minute limit Jira now?
Yes, because of the cache replication. In fact, it's actually 4 nodes, so 5 is it's unusual.
Nobody else is running into any, maybe not.
Not yet.
Scale, right. Not at this scale.
I'm just curious because we were looking to use Jira for managing SLA of customers, which we briefly experimented with, flood system very quickly. False positive. But do you engage Atlassian?
Oh yeah, we have a dedicated TAM and also Premier support.
Are they just at the end of the limits?
No, they provided suggestions.
Yeah, you did. That's why I'm like.
Oh, okay, yes. We hired Boris. Boris is my savior. He's going to come in and clean this up for me.
When I was trying to interject a little bit, I prompted for it, like you thought, and the goal wasn't to talk about the goal. That's normally my spiel. I wanted to kind of bring this question around from earlier, which is, I think Gordon was trying to solicit feedback from the community around what Teskey's mentioned, tools are you using, and what pros and cons found with various tools. We're hoping that we could actually solicit feedback.
Right.
That's fine. In my previous place, we used to have X-ray. The whole land is environment. And X-ray had a very similar problem.
Yeah, X-ray had a very similar thing. Like whenever the automation kicks in, whenever the release is there, you can suddenly see there is a spike. But since my user base was not this big like what Verizon is having, I could still feel the pain, like what the crap? Why am I bringing this into Jira? So I feel that the POC what you're running is a great initiative in the right direction to keep them separate, like away from the regular issue tracking or the bug tracking, because the test case management, I don't think Jira is right now in a place where it can really scale to that stage where it can handle so many issue creations on the fly, like 20,000, like what you have is like, I feel is insane already. Yeah, but I had the same problem in my previous place. And since I left there, I'm not sure are they still alive or what's happening with them. But yeah, so we had the same thing with the X-ray as well.
Right. Yeah, because the testing user can bring down your Jira users, and the Jira user can bring down the testing users. So you really want to separate these two where one doesn't affect the other based on whatever business demand that they have.
Along those lines, did you ever think of just creating a separate instance?
Yes, I have. That would be actually the easy way out and also the cheaper way out. However, the problem with that is you just band-aiding the issue, right? So the way that we see the growth rate going is that this is just the beginning. And we think we can probably triple this type of volume of test users. So in that case, if that's the case, that means that I would say 4 years down the line, I'm going to be in the same situation with this dedicated instance that I have for the testing users. So to address the problem from the get-go, I think an enterprise test case management tool is needed for the long-term good of the company and also my team.
Atlassian and Atlassian just released like a scaling your service desk like they put something like that. The hard thing isn't about like can you scale the application to 10 million issues. It's not that hard. It's all stock Jira system with 10 million issues. Fine. Probably run in single server. Right? The question is, what are your bursts looking like? Right? And how are you getting there? Like with 200,000 issues a month, net positive after deletion. 0.4 million issues a year. Before this rate grows, which it will, right? So 2.4 million issues a year means that every year they're generating more issues almost every single like for scale. And
right.
The biggest right now is LinkedIn at 5 million. Right? So every 2 years we're going to generate the same volume. I don't know. With Confluence, I don't think anyone's had that problem. Confluence is limited performance-wise, mostly by DB, and DB is very much a known commodity. Right? Like you very much just throw more compute at it, throw more cache at it, throw cluster at it, whatever. So it's kind of like a solved problem. But like the scene is a whole different issue because everything in here is like C. That's I think the Confluence support team tried to sell me on that when I worked there. And, they told me that Confluence was a powered up version of Jira, and we told them that Jira was a powered up version of Confluence, and nobody went that way.
Okay.
If I could just ask one other question, are you? Go ahead.
I just wanted to find out what are some of the areas that you are imposing on those 1,000 tickets that you're eliminating? You said you're
The custom fields?
first and then you sell them, basically?
Sorry, the issues or the custom fields?
The
Issues, criteria.
Yeah.
Anything
Because,
that is
they're not working. I mean, they're obviously issues. So
any issues that are closed and older than 6 months.
automatically, if it was resolved or not.
No, closed. So if it's closed, then they're done.
Okay. my question is, because you can close tickets, either, for various reasons.
Mhm.
I mean, you want to close tickets because they are actually resolved and it's not working, it's no longer a bug.
Mhm.
But the way you were explaining, it sounded like you just automatically closed it.
Oh, okay.
So, but issue's still there.
Right. No, they're resolved. These are issues that are resolved. But we do automatically close issues too if we put the issue in deferred status. Right. But if we don't put it in deferred status and it's in progress or open, it will stay there. So there are issues that are back in 2016, right, that we cannot touch. But I'll get there. I mean, if they don't, those guys doesn't touch those issues for a while, I'm gonna go in and close them myself.
So I'm also having that I didn't do fail, but there were really, really old issues, and it's a problem, and things change over time, and either it's no longer an issue, but if one can go back that far to really revisit that thing,
Mhm.
or it's still exists. So is there a way to manage how you feel with an issue? Because I'm running.
Yeah, you need to set a governance policy that is being supported by your user group, right? And the governance policy should say any issues older than X amount of time, doesn't matter what that is, we remove it. Or you can say anything that's not touched for X amount of time, we're gonna get rid of it. When I say get rid of it, you wanna archive it out of somewhere first, right? So you're not really deleting it. You're just gonna take that database or export it into XML and just store it somewhere. Right? So if they really need it back or for some auditing purposes, it's still there. But you just want to get it out of the system.
Getting rid of it from a technical perspective, we're going to say about getting like that policy in place.
I think that part of it.
Okay, well, then just download the automation plugin, create a transition
I think it's the worst, yeah. I think the worst. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of more things are going automation.
Right. Actually, the new version of Jira will actually allow you to archive issues so that it actually doesn't become part of the scene index.
So is that automatically archive issues or automatically archive projects or both? Right. Right. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Just in the interest of time, we have another full speech ahead, so I don't want to keep the group waiting or the speaker waiting. Gordon, thank you so much. And I think Madhu has, as for all of our lightning speakers, the same way we award our full speakers some prizes, we also award our lightning speakers some prizes. So again, just in the vein of we want to hear from you. We want to hear your story, whether it's a lightning talk or a full talk. Madhu has I think what's today? Yeah, it's an Amazon gift card. Who doesn't use Amazon, right? So I don't know. Right. Thank you, Gordon, and thank you for starting up the discussion. And if other people are using other tools besides X-Ray and Zephyr, hit up Gordon and give him some of the pros and cons of it. Okay. Next up is Himanshu. Himanshu Chetri. He's from Addteq. Addteq is one of the Atlassian Platinum experts. They're one of our sponsors also here. And Himanshu is going to talk about full stack monitoring with Dynatrace, and he'll take it off from here. And just a reminder, after Himanshu's talk, we'll also do a quick raffle, and then we'll get into networking. And there's plenty of beer left, plenty of food. So, mic'd up, ready?
Yep. All right. Hi, everyone.
All right. So thanks for the intro, Marlon. And like Marlon mentioned, I am from Addteq. We're a platinum solution provider. And in today's talk, we'll talk about monitoring more from the perspective of some general strategies as well as our experience with some of the monitoring tools out there. So in terms of the agenda, we'll dive into some general monitoring strategies that may be useful regardless of what monitoring tool you use. Then we'll go into some of the monitoring tools that we've used at Addteq. And then we'll talk about AI-powered monitoring, more specifically using Dynatrace and our experience with it recently. And we'll wrap up after that. And we'll start off with a full disclosure. Apart from being partners with Atlassian, we also recently became partners with Dynatrace. Since we wanted to find our go-to monitoring tool that we could use internally ourselves as well as recommend to our customers. And we decided to settle on Dynatrace. So in terms of monitoring strategies, anyone who's been in the ops world probably has a very opinionated view in terms of what they look to gain from a monitoring system they may be using. And even this, you can say, is a very opinionated view based on our experience at Addteq, based on the applications we host, both Atlassian and non-Atlassian, as well as what we've seen some of our customers use, both in terms of the monitoring tooling as well as what they do well and not so well in terms of monitoring. Based on that, I just decided to come up with some of the common trends that we see and what we would recommend. So in terms of your monitoring strategy, one key part we would stress on is visibility. So for example, if you are a tool admin, let's say a Jira admin, a lot of the times, if you're a Jira administrator, you may have pretty good view in terms of how Jira is behaving, because you're administrating the tool day-to-day basis. There are some built-in features within Jira. So for example, things like the database monitoring graph that Jira shows you, and then on the Jira system information page as well, it might report some low-level system information and so on. Those are useful, but they still provide a very limited view into the health of the system. A lot of the times when we talk about any application, even the Atlassian tools, usually there is a full stack involved. You may have a load balancer or a web server in front of the Jira application, and then you have your database server, you have the underlying infrastructure, both in terms of the servers where the application is deployed to, and any other system dependencies. And then it also gets further complicated by the fact that a lot of applications communicate with other applications. So for example, if you have the Atlassian toolchain, you may have Jira talking to Confluence, Jira talking to Crowd, Jira talking to Bamboo, and so on. So if you have a tool that can ideally let you visualize your application stack and the different components as well as the interaction between the different applications, it's ideal. So it's best to go for a solution that can provide that. And that also goes along the lines of full stack monitoring. So rather than monitoring these individual pieces by themselves, it's good if your monitoring tool or tools can provide you that full stack view. So when you think about Jira, it should be able to visualize the fact that it's consisting of the application server, the database, the web server, and how is the system performing as a whole. Right? So if you have, let's say, Jira performance issues, what layer of the stack is the issue currently happening on? Is it the database that's currently lagging? Or is it the web requests that are currently failing? Or do you have some Jira plugin that's generating a lot of exceptions that may potentially cause some performance issues? And then the next thing that you probably want to look for is anomaly detection. So if anyone has been in the ops world, I think they can relate to the fact that there is a lot of tooling, which is great because you can have a lot of niche tools that can help you in your day-to-day ops work as well as monitoring. But a lot of these tools also tend to generate their own alerts. So you may have a monitoring tool that can, or a system that can tell you low-level infrastructure details such as, hey, your disk is filling up. Or you may have an APM solution that can tell you about failing transactions and so on. So a lot of these alerts tend to get very noisy, and a lot of ops teams are inundated with a lot of different alerts. They have alert fatigue. That's becoming a very popular term because of the fact that they get so many alerts that it's very difficult to sort through the noise and find that useful insight that may help prevent potential downtimes, or even when you have downtime, you have like a volume of data you need to analyze. So a lot of monitoring tools are now starting to utilize strategies like machine learning and anomaly detection so that you can use those in order to gain valuable insights. If you have used like a more traditional monitoring tool like Nagios, which I'll talk about in a bit, it relies on the concept of defining static thresholds. So for example, you can say that, hey, Nagios, going to send me a warning alert if the CPU is pegged at 90%, but then send me a critical alert if the CPU is pegged at 100%. So you have to define these static thresholds, which may work for certain things, but then over time, as your system evolves, you have to keep tweaking these static thresholds. And then again, you end up with alert fatigue because you're not able to catch up in terms of how you fine tune the system and how it generates those alerts. So ideally, if you have a system where you don't need to rely on these kinds of static thresholds and threshold tuning, then it's ideal. System that can do more modern learning-based anomaly detection. And then in terms of alerting as well, this is another topic where a lot of ops team can relate to. Rather than getting paged left, right, and center from all of these different tools and systems you might be using, one key thing to always keep in mind is the alert that probably matters the most is the one that's more user-facing or customer-facing. So for example, if you have a system where the load is high, but it hasn't quite impacted the end user, or you have visibility into the fact that your end user experience isn't affected yet, then maybe you can treat it with slightly less criticality. I mean, it could be an early warning sign that you should investigate, but at the end of the day, to prevent alert fatigue, it's best to concentrate on alerts that have end user impact. So in terms of monitoring tools, there are a lot of different monitoring tools out there, and a lot of these tools have a lot of features. So it's very difficult to kind of have experience across all of the tool chain, across all of the features they offer. But in terms of some of the tools that we've used at Addteq and our experience with it, I'll first start off with Nagios. So I have a kind of a love-hate relationship with Nagios. Has anyone else here used Nagios? Is anyone here still using Nagios? Yeah. So Nagios is considered sort of one of the classic monitoring tools because of the fact that it's free open source. They do have a commercial edition. I haven't used that, but the free and open source version of Nagios is pretty popular. One of the key reasons is that it's easy to set up, and there are a lot of community plugins out there. So if you have some kind of niche monitoring you need to do, you can usually look up the plugin that may already exist on the Nagios plugin exchange or on GitHub. And you can also write your own Nagios monitoring plugins for something custom that you want to monitor. And the way to write those plugins is pretty easy. It's pretty language agnostic. And it's a pretty good tool overall. And a lot of ops engineers are very experienced with using Nagios. And with Nagios, though, the one key disadvantage is you have to rely on defining those static thresholds that I talked about earlier. And even internally at Addteq, we have some systems, some legacy system that we still monitor with Nagios. It gets the job done. And then we've also worked with some APM tools like New Relic and AppDynamic. And in terms of specifically monitoring Atlassian tools, we've seen some users struggle with enabling the Java-based agent that's required for monitoring Atlassian tools specifically. We've had some users complain about things like, it adds up to the application startup time, with the time it takes to load the Java agent, which is required to monitor the Java-based Atlassian tool that you might be using. And then things like log monitoring. Log monitoring is great. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, that's AppDynamics. I think once they got acquired by Cisco, they changed the. Yeah, that used to be like the A, right? Yeah. And then actually, let me go to the next slide. Yeah. So in terms of log monitoring, I think the two of the most popular options we've seen used is, on one side, you have the sort of free open source Elastic stack. So Elasticsearch, Kibana, Logstash. And then on the sort of commercial side of log monitoring, a lot of organizations tend to go with Splunk. Anyone currently using Elasticsearch or the Elastic stack and Splunk? So log monitoring is great, right? Because you can use that to gain insight into your application health. Specifically, the Atlassian tools, they use the standard Java logging, and you can gain some insights. For example, you could group up all of the errors that are happening in the application log, and that can give you some insights into some potential areas that you may need to investigate. Or you may have a sort of an instance where you're getting a lot of traffic, a lot of automated user traffic, like Gordon talked about earlier. And in some of the enterprises, they have difficulty determining all of those, the service accounts that might be hitting your application, especially ones that are generating a lot of requests. And log monitoring tools can help because they can help you create this really nice dashboard in terms of the top clients and provide insights like the IP address and the geolocation from which they're originating. And they can really help your ops admin and tool admins with their day-to-day work in terms of managing the health of the applications. And then obviously the full stack monitoring. And obviously Dynatrace might not be the only tool out there, but what we've used and what we've experienced so far is with Dynatrace. And I'll be diving deeper into some of the features of Dynatrace and why we found it useful in comparison to some of the other tools that we've used in the past. So one of the features that Dynatrace really promotes is sort of AI-based monitoring. And even the title of the talk today had that keyword AI. AI obviously can be a bit of a buzzword. It's highly debated in terms of what is AI. A lot of people would say that AI is machine learning. Some of them will say that AI is this term that really shouldn't exist because there is no true example of artificial intelligence and so on. But the way I look at AI is that it's just a smart set of learning features that can crunch a lot of data and provide valuable insights. And you can say AI is more of the buzzword to represent these kinds of smart features that are being baked into all kinds of applications. And then even your monitoring tools can benefit quite a bit if they have adopted AI. So what we found useful in terms of what Dynatrace calls AI is the fact that it is crunching a lot of data points about your systems. So once you start monitoring your systems with Dynatrace, it's looking at multiple layers of data. They call it some fancy multi-dimensional data analytics in terms of crunching data about the underlying infrastructure, crunching data about the application being monitored, crunching data about the user behavior and user traffic patterns as well. So it's taking all of these data points and then it's trying to automatically detect potential problems. So it'll alert you about potential problems. In some cases, it may lead to detecting issues before they become more glaring issues for your customers. And we will see some examples of that specifically in context of the Atlassian tools and so on. So overall, right? So let's kind of go with the idea that AI is this feature that your monitoring tools should ideally have in terms of crunching a lot of data points and then providing valuable insights so that you don't spend a lot of time looking at a lot of different individual metrics and trying to make sense of it. So Dynatrace, kind of touts itself as a full stack monitoring tool because if you look at the sort of stack, right? So at the low level, you have the underlying infrastructure. And a lot of folks, when they hear about infrastructure monitoring or monitoring the tools, mostly think about the low level stack, which is your infrastructure like your OS, if you're using some kind of cloud provider, the different kinds of components and features offered by it, network monitoring, and so on. So if you go one step above the stack, then you have the actual application. A lot of APM tools tend to concentrate on that mid layer in terms of monitoring the different transactions that are happening within the application stack, monitoring the different interaction between the application components, things like the database and other external systems and so on. And then the top layer, arguably the most important, is the user-facing or the customer-facing layer, because you ideally want to also monitor the end user experience. So for example, if you're using Jira, the common end user experience you probably want to be monitoring is what is the responsiveness of Jira? Is Jira erroring out constantly on certain pages? Is Jira extra slow on certain pages and so on? So a full stack monitoring view is a view ideally across all of these layers, and hopefully without a whole lot of redundancy in terms of the alerts or the insights that it provides. And obviously, we'll kind of look at some examples of how the Dynatrace AI can alert you about potential issues around your Atlassian tools if you're using it to monitor. We'll start off with a simpler example in terms of go ahead.
Did the last slide convey that you can run hosted or on-prem?
Yes, so that's a good point. So Dynatrace is offered both in SaaS and on-premise versions. And right now at Addteq, we are using the SaaS version, and we know a lot of larger enterprise customers who mostly use the self-hosted version of Dynatrace. And in terms of Dynatrace, one thing I'll mention is that Dynatrace agent that's used for monitoring is pretty interesting. So a lot of APM tools, like I mentioned earlier, rely on your application-specific agent. So if you're monitoring Atlassian tools, which are mostly based on Java, then usually you have to load the Java agent into the application. But in terms of Dynatrace, Dynatrace has an agent called OneAgent. It's an OS-level agent. You install it with root privileges or your system admin privileges. And it basically, that's it. So once you install that agent, go ahead. Yes, so you can configure it for some additional sort of like JMX monitoring. But things like JVM monitoring, it'll do that seamlessly without any other additional configuration. And then even in terms of the end user experience as well, it will immediately start monitoring the end user experience of the application. So for example, tying it into the page responsiveness, tying into the individual web transactions and so on. And I'll show some examples of that. But in terms of the agent, I think I found it the most interesting of all the tools we've used, which is that you just throw this like one OS level agent and that's it. It starts immediately monitoring the entire stack. And there are some additional configuration tweaks that you can do in the web UI. But even with the defaults, you get some pretty good monitoring out of the box. So this is an example that most Jira admins may relate to, especially if you have sort of scaling or size issues, which is that user is reporting that something is slow in Jira. So even when you get a report such as this, your first struggle is, okay, how do I reproduce this problem? Or what data points do I have? So if you are using the sort of low-level approach, you could maybe look at your web server access logs and try to look at the response time and so on. But ideally, you want to be able to know what the exact user experience for that particular user was. And Dynatrace has a lot of features. And one of the features that I find really useful is that it lets you track user sessions. So what it does is if you use that, if you use the user session tracking feature of Dynatrace, you can track individual user sessions across your application. So if you're monitoring Jira, you can either choose to monitor 100% of the user sessions, or you can take a smaller data point. So for example, you can tell Dynatrace that, okay, only capture 1% of the user sessions within Jira, so that you can then drill down further. But in this case, we had the 100% user session tracking enabled for Jira. And then optionally, you can also use the feature within Dynatrace where you can also capture the usernames. Now, this can be a tricky topic. If you have compliance and other governance issues that don't allow it, then you may not be able to utilize it. But if you can get through compliance, then it's a useful feature to enable where you can ask Dynatrace to also decode the username, the Jira username of the users whose sessions are being monitored. So in this case, the user name is Andreas Grabner. That's the Jira username of the user who reported this issue. So we now have the ability to drill into the recent user sessions of this particular user. And then in terms of the user sessions, we can now drill into one particular user session, which may be the one that the user reported because it shows 38.7 seconds of action time, whatever action was being tracked in that particular session. And it shows that the user was trying to load a particular issue within the Jira instance. And the other thing we can gain is what was the user's browser environment like? Were they accessing Jira from a desktop device or a mobile device? And then what their IP address was, what was the geolocation information, and so on. So this is another useful set of information that can help you debug what the user may have experienced. And then it provides us a breakdown. So we are tracking this page load action for the particular issue that the user was trying to load. And it shows that the total 38.7 seconds of page load time can be broken down into 0.2 seconds of server response time, 4.8 seconds of network time, and then 33.7 seconds of front-end time. So that's a valuable piece of insight that you can now use to further investigate this particular issue. And I think what I would like to highlight is that even this level of insight can be very useful for the investigation, because a lot of the times Jira admins are going in pretty dark, right? When they are investigating an issue, they have to then reach out to someone to provide them some low-level logs or look it up themselves, or or they have to request the user that, okay, please tell me how to reproduce the issue. Maybe let's do a screen share or so on. But this level of user-level experience monitoring can be really helpful. And I have a few other examples. And in this particular case, you can also do a waterfall analysis to then look at the front-end assets that were loaded on that particular page to further drill down into breaking down that 33.7 seconds of front-end time. So let's go to the second example. Your users may have, or you may want to know which Jira projects or Confluence spaces contribute to the most page load time. And then within the application monitoring section, you can look at different kinds of user actions happening within the page. And in terms of the top actions, you can then tell the, go ahead.
So when it's monitoring the user, does it also monitor like windows they have open, the apps they have running in addition to?
So this is more of user session tracking from within the application you're monitoring. So it can tell you what page they were in within Jira. And potentially what they were doing inside of Jira, but it wouldn't be able to track anything outside of it. So it's more of using the browser technology to monitor what's happening from the user session point of view, but then tying that perhaps into the backend and the other layers in the stack. So in this page, we are able to sort the slowest loading pages, and we use the /browse URI to figure out the different types of page load and Confluence space load actions. So let's look at another example. So in this case, Dynatrace. So we talked about AI, right? So the AI the next two examples will show the Dynatrace AI in action, because in this case, without us defining any kinds of thresholds, Dynatrace is going to inform us of potential problems. So what Dynatrace does is, when it's doing all of its magical data crunching, it will then try to discover potential issues which it calls problems, and it will notify you that it has detected a new problem. And then we'll see some examples of those. So in this case, Dynatrace has sent us an alert that it has detected automatic response time degradation for Bamboo. And the way it does that is, now we've not defined the static thresholds for what the response time should be. So what Dynatrace is doing is that it's monitoring the response time for your application on a sliding window basis. I believe it's 7 days or so, to baseline the state of the system. So it's looking at, what are your traffic patterns throughout the weekdays, what are your traffic patterns throughout the weekends, and so on, to create this dynamic sense of the baseline of the system. And then if it detects that you have deviated from the baseline, then it will alert you saying that, hey, you have this deviation from the baseline that you may want to be aware of. And we'll see an example of this for Bamboo. So we receive this alert. And it tells us that, okay, the response time has degraded for Bamboo. And then it also tells us that this problem has been open for 12 minutes. So the problem is still active, indicated by the red banner. It shows us a business impact analysis in terms of whether these are internal system service calls or user-facing issues. And then it provides us some number. It tells us that the deviation is 317% from the baseline that it has automatically detected for this application. We can then drill down into the response time for both for dynamic web requests as well as resource requests. Resource requests could be static things like images and CSS, but dynamic are sort of the actual application requests. And in this case, we have the option to do a response time degradation analysis or look at the outliers. So when you click on Analyze Outliers, it gives us this graph. It does a breakdown of all of the response time distribution during that problematic period. And in this case, we selected the response time greater than 2.26 seconds. And then it shows us all of the web requests during that time frame when the problem was occurring, with the response time greater than 2.2 seconds. And then it also shows us the requests sorted by the total time consumption. It takes the average response time and I think multiplies by the number of requests that are happening. So then again, it gives us the additional level of insight that, okay, Dynatrace detected that you're deviating from the baseline, but what are the requests that are contributing towards the deviation? What are the requests that were occurring during that problematic period? And then you can further drill down and do the analysis. So let's now look at a Jira example. Again, we get this alert from Dynatrace that there is a failure rate increase. So Dynatrace is also monitoring things like your HTTP failure rates that may be occurring within the application due to some exceptions. And we'll see an example of that for Jira. So again, we get a similar screen, but this time the banner is gray, indicating that the problem is no longer occurring. So Jira has detected that the problem occurred, on July 4th between 3:07 and 3:30. It was so the problem was open for 23 minutes, but then it has now automatically closed the problem because it's no longer occurring. But as an ops engineer or a tool admin, you may need to do the root cause analysis to find out what exactly happened during that problematic period. So we can do a business impact analysis in terms of looking at the transactions that were affected. So it shows us that 9 service calls were affected during the problem. And the really interesting part is automatic root cause detection. That's the AI in play, which is telling us that the the root cause detected was due to a database issue. And we'll drill down into that. So again, it gives us some numbers in terms of the number of requests per minute that were affected and the percentage of total requests that were affected during the problem period. And we'll again dive into the failure rate. So there's an option to look at the dynamic requests. On the top right, we can see that that's the period that we're analyzing during July 4th. So we have this page where we can look at things like response time, CPU throughput, as well as the failure rate. And we have the option to then look at analyze the failure rate degradation, which shows us the exception that was occurring. So there's a HTTP 500 internal server error that is occurring for Jira during that problem. And it shows us the individual web requests. We see these are web requests related to adding Jira issue comments. And then we have the option to drill down further. And we can look at the individual requests that were failing during that period. And then Dynatrace has this concept called pure path that takes a transaction and does a complete breakdown across the full stack. And in this case, we're able to drill down into an individual database level exception that was occurring. So there's a Java SQL exception. And then we see there is a message for the exception which says incorrect string value for column action body. So this is a table related to Jira comments. And then the issue turned out to be that Jira has a known issue for MySQL where 4-byte character Unicode is not well supported, and this helped drill down into that particular issue. But we can see that in this case the system told us proactively that hey, user was not able to add comments into this particular issue, and this is the exact database MySQL database level exception that was the root cause, which is I think pretty neat. A lot of the admins may relate to the fact that unless the user reports it, or there's a lot of noise generated from the user community, it's very difficult to drill down into these kinds of issues with just basic monitoring or just by going through the logs. And again, these are just a few examples of how Dynatrace could potentially be helpful for monitoring your Atlassian and non-Atlassian application stack. We are using it right now pretty successfully for monitoring the entire Atlassian tool stack. We also do a lot of work with things like Docker these days. It also has Docker support, so it can also provide some container level insights that you may have. And again, what we really like is that in terms of the setup, you just throw the one agent on the server that's being monitored, and then it pretty much gives you all of these insights. And then you can do some further tweaks, things like the user session example I showed you. If you want to retrieve the username, then you may need to go in and fill around with some options in terms of how you use the CSS selector within the Jira web UI to figure out what data element holds the username, and then tying that into the user sessions and so on. But just to summarize what we covered so far in this talk, focus on the strategy. So you may already be using one or more monitoring tools, but you really want to think about what is your strategy around alerts? What is your strategy around what you consider critical enough to page the team member in the middle of the night? How do you prevent alert fatigue and so on? So you can use a combination of smart monitoring strategies and smart monitoring tools to hopefully come up with a really good strategy that works for your organization. And then obviously focus on full stack monitoring. The classic monitoring tools like Nagios are great, but if you have the option to use a full stack monitoring tool, definitely go for it. AI, again, arguably a buzzword, but if your tool claims to have AI and can help, you provide some automatic insights into potential issues without you having to do a lot of manual work, then it's best to consider tooling that may support that. And just to wrap up, since I mentioned earlier that Addteq is both an Atlassian partner as well as Dynatrace, one of the things we released recently was a Jira plugin for Dynatrace. Because again, you could be using Dynatrace to monitor all kinds of systems out there. And if you want these problems that we looked at earlier to automatically create Jira issues so that your team can start using those Jira issues to start their investigation, you could potentially use the Jira plugin that we released with Dynatrace. And then we also have a link to an Addteq blog that goes into some more examples like the ones I showed you earlier. And then Dynatrace has a SaaS as well as a hosted version, and then they have a link where you can sign up for a trial. But if you're interested to evaluate Dynatrace, to use it to monitor your Atlassian or non-Atlassian tools, we'd definitely be interested to talk to you afterwards. And yep, that is it.
Thank you, Himanshu. Questions?
Sure.
I have two.
Sure.
First, do you need full query logging enabled in MySQL in order for that?
No. So it has additional.
Grab the insert statement.
So the one agent does that automatically. That's the really neat thing about it. You can enable additional MySQL, monitoring if you provide like the MySQL user details.
No, but that was a query statement. So where did
And
you
it.
catch that?
So the one agent detects that automatically. We did not enable any additional MySQL options. So that's one of the really neat things about Dynatrace is the pure path feature, which I might have quickly skimmed over. What it does, it takes a transaction and it automatically breaks it down into the individual HTTP requests as well as the database queries. And again, that's probably one of the neat features of the tool.
Second question, is the dependency mapping built dynamically?
Yes. So Dynatrace calls it Smartscape, the feature for mapping the dependencies at the different layers of the full stack. So for example, at the server level, it'll show you that, okay, your application is hosted across these servers in these data centers. And then on the next stack, at the application stack, it can show you that your application is interacting with these other applications. So for example, I didn't include it in the slide, but the Smartscape view for Jira would show you things like, okay, Jira is consisting of the application server, which is communicating with the database, which is communicating with your web server or load balancer. And then Jira is also communicating with Confluence and Crowd. So in the visualization that they call Smartscape, it automatically shows you that dependency mapping across all the components.
For the monitoring, are the performance-based metrics auto-discovered or you manually input?
So it's auto-discovered. Once you start monitoring the application, they start this like sliding window, which is pretty well documented. And if I recall correctly, it's like a 1 week sliding window that it uses to baseline the system and to also constantly update the baseline.
Okay, so what about seasonality of
So it claims that it's able to handle those spikes. So for example, if you're an e-commerce service provider,
yeah.
I mean, they have some documentation which I can point to, but that's one of the examples they showed that, okay, during the holiday season, the system is going to have an unusual level of spike, but it talks about how it tries to avoid false positives around those spikes. So the documentation is pretty good. That's one of the things I really like about Dynatrace is also that if you go to the website, even areas like the anomaly detection and the learning is pretty well documented with those kinds of examples.
Do you have a question? Comment?
It reeks of BS to me that you can connect somehow to Java without.
Right.
It reeks of BS to me that it can somehow connect to Java without something. Like Java has a very defined set of inspector process, and it very clearly requires.
So I didn't mention, right, what Dynatrace calls is one agent. And I mean, you can try it out yourself or look up on the website. Yep. So the example I showed you, there was no additional configuration. For the web application, what it does is, so let's say, it detects a web app on the server. It has a default placeholder that it calls my web application. But let's say you have two different web apps running on the server. You can go in and say that, hey, anything that matches this URI is Jira versus some other application. Right.
JavaScript is injection. You're not doing that at all. That means I have to have proxy ready to go through.
No, so once you install one agent, it does like different injections by itself. So it's injecting things at the process layer and so on. So for example, once you deploy, let's say you have a Jira server and you install the one agent, you have to restart Jira for those OS level hooks that the one agent uses. So think of the agent more at the OS layer. And then yeah, in terms of JavaScript injection and so on, it does that all internally, but it doesn't require you to like go and load a Java agent into Jira. And that's again one of the really interesting things about Dynatrace. Would
That's what I have a really, really hard time. Like that's fundamentally not a
unless you're claiming that I'm falsifying the example. Right. But again, the example, yeah, please try it out. Even the example I showed you earlier, right? So the first one or two examples are from the Dynatrace side, and then the later examples are from our internal instance of Dynatrace. So, but it's definitely.
This is like dark magic.
It definitely, I agree. I mean, even me, when recently, initially when I heard the pitch from Dynatrace, I mean, even I thought it was BS until I tried it out. Right. And Dynatrace is a pretty well-known company that's been out there, and I think I mean even if you go with the marketing buzz, I think they are on some kind of Gartner magic quadrant, if that helps. But yeah, definitely would encourage you to try it out. It's definitely a cool monitoring tool. Yeah. So part of it is supposed to be part of that magical AI sauce that Dynatrace has. So even in this case, so the fact that we have the one agent running on the server where Jira is running, as well as we have the Dynatrace OS level agent on the server where the MySQL database is running. So it's able to tie those two entities together automatically. So it's monitoring the fact that Jira is using MySQL server on a MySQL instance on this other server, and then it's considering the fact that okay, in the application topology, it consists of the Jira application server, the Apache server, as well as MySQL as a whole. It's one application stack.
I guess I was trying to figure out the root causing functionality is somewhat similar, like you were talking about the algorithm.
It is. So even in the last example I showed you where it said that, hey, in Jira, some of the requests are failing, right? And it said that the automatic root cause was because the requests were failing at the database level. So it gave you that root cause analysis screen in the last example I showed you. And then at that point, you have the option to either conclude that, yes, that's the root cause analysis is obvious, or in many cases, you want to do a drill down that, okay, it's failing at the database layer, but what was the error that was failing? So in the example, what I showed was you were able to then look at the transaction and see that, hey, Jira was trying to do this database insert statement in MySQL, and it was failing with this particular exception. And this was the data it had the issue inserting into the database.
Thank you for the questions. And Himanshu, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
So just a few quick announcements, and then we'll wrap up and we'll do the raffle, and then we'll do some networking. The place is open until we get kicked out of here by 9 o'clock. So there's still plenty of food and drink to have. So just first of all, thank you to the 3 speakers from today. So again, Randall Thompson from LogicMonitor, Gordon Wang from Verizon, and Himanshu Chetri from Addteq. Just a big round of applause again for them. And again, just a final thank you to the sponsors, Atlassian for the user group, Priceline for the event space, Addteq for the sushi, Ecor and Column for the drinks, dessert, wings, Atlas Authority for the speaker prizes, or the non-partner speaker prizes. So thank you again to the sponsors. We rely on them pretty heavily. And just there's lots of tentatives on the screen where, as I mentioned, one of the biggest challenges we have is event spaces. So we think we've secured 3 event spaces where trying to lock in speakers and like work the magic of making sure that we have speakers that are available on the dates that we have event locations available. So this is what it currently looks like. August 9th, pre-summit event at Schoology. That one is pretty locked in. We have the location and the date locked in. The speakers are to be TBD. For those of you who haven't been to a pre-summit event, typically we get speakers that speak at Summit that are in the New York City area come and speak at our event, so that those who don't go to Summit get like an early preview of it. So that's usually a pretty popular event that our Christmas event and the pre-summit event usually get our highest attendance. So we don't know who our speakers are yet. We're working, we're kind of pressuring Atlassian for that. And so we're trying to get those speakers as soon as possible. As soon as we do get the speakers, we'll release you'll get the email about that. And then September 19th, sorry, if you could go back, September 19th and October 17th, we think we've secured eBay for those dates. eBay was where we hosted our last event. We don't have confirmed speakers yet. We have a couple of people in the pipeline. You could be one of the confirmed speakers, so come see me afterwards. Okay, and then the last thing is we mentioned that there are some job openings or job opportunities. There's 4 that we have. We sent out one in the last email. So the first one is there's a Jira administrator. Your very own Madhu Matrabai is hiring a Jira administrator. So there's a plug for one of your org leaders. So come speak to Madhu about that if you're interested. And we should put do you have a job posting on there? Okay. We'll get it on there. So these slides will be available on our event page after this, so you can directly click on there and pass it along. Obviously, you might not be interested, but if there's anybody in your network that's interested, please let us know. Just on that note, also, if you're hiring for any positions, I know that Gordon, at one point you were hiring. We're keeping a running list of these, so we'll we'll broadcast them just so that you can circulate it in your network and we can help each other out. Ithaca JStore, that's me. I'm hiring a support engineer on my team. There's a job posting there. Atlassian is one of the tools that's covered under that, but there's many other tools that it's primarily for internal tools and doing system administration and that type of work. Yeah. YNR, Young and Rubicon, there's a platform architect. For those of you that know Craig Castle-Mead, he's Australian with a beard. He's normally here at these events. He's hiring 3 different positions, New York City, London, and Singapore. Oh, I should mention that mine, I indicated over there, it's in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We have a remote office in Michigan, so we're not hiring in New York, but if you have anybody in Michigan that's looking for a position or looking to relocate, there's a position there. Or London and Singapore for YNR. And then finally, Metropolitan Museum of Art, they contacted us and they have an opening too. I don't think the contact is here, but he sent us an email just asking us about that. So we'll post all of these on our event page. We'll try and circulate them in an email afterwards also, but circulate them in your network just to help each other out. And then I think that's it, and we can get to the raffle, right? Any other announcements? Okay. All right. So get out your raffle tickets. If you have a green badge, if you have a red badge, you do not qualify for a raffle ticket.